Welcome to another episode of the CTO-CTO podcast. In today's Challenge Accepted episode, our guest is Boris Lokschin, CEO and co-founder of Spryker. Boris talks about the challenge of entering an already established and saturated e-commerce platforms market with Spryker and still winning big time. He also discusses why microservices are not for everyone, and he even shares the biggest lesson of his professional career.
We're gonna talk about how in just 5 years they built the company from ground up to Gartner Magic Quarter, Spryker philosophy of finding the yet unsolved business problems, then solving them with the product. I will ask Boris how they position the product between all existing SaaS, PaaS, on-prem, overrated platforms and microservices. Hello Boris, thank you for accepting my invitation.
Peter, hi, thank you for having me.
Can you please maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you did before founding Spryker?
Yeah, sure. It's my third company, so I always was a founder in the technology commerce space. I founded my first company when I was 17. We built what you would call today a SaaS shopping system back then.
Wow.
Kind of accidentally. So started off doing some online marketing work, and then building websites, and then try to participate in a local hometown startup competition where the first prize was a free office space for a year, and they did not want to accept us being a services company. So we needed to have a product, and then we put it into the business plan. Of course, there was no product back then. Kind of put all the buzzwords that we got from a large computer trade show you might remember called CeBIT. It was
yes, of course.
Actually the largest. Yeah. So this is my hometown in Hanover, in Germany. Unfortunately, they stopped doing it. But when I was a child and teenager, I always loved going there and seeing all these booths. And, dreamed of one day being there as well. So I kind of have put all the buzzwords that I heard back then into this concept and business plan, and we participated. We did not win, but we ended up being second. And then people started calling us and asking for what was in this plan as the product, right? Which essentially described software as a service card system. You would maybe call it today.
When was it? It was early 2000.
Yeah, I think it was 2001, 2002.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So it was very early on, and. We just put all the buzzwords, like fast time to market and paying on a monthly basis, and not these large big checks that people used to pay back then.
Yes.
And people started calling us and started asking for this magical product, and we really had to admit a couple of calls in a row that there was no such product yet. Yeah. And then we got a call from a very large electronics retailer here in Germany. And then they asked the magical question after hearing again that there is no such product. Okay, how much money you guys would need to build it? Because what we read about is very interesting. So I dropped the largest number that came to my mind back then at them, and they accepted. So we ended up building it and ended up we what you would really call today a software as a service kind of a product, which first they scaled within the retailers network, and then we onboarded more and more customers from the outside. And then 2.5-3 years later, we ended up selling this product in an asset deal to them. So they kind of insourced it. Oh, okay. They hired a few, because it just became too big for them. At this point in time, I don't remember the actual numbers, but I think back then, if you had 10 million in online revenues, this was considered to be huge, right? A huge amount. And they were,
absolutely,
they were approaching this number. So I think the business risk for them, partnering with a bunch of, young guys sitting mostly still at home, wearing jeans, was a bit too dangerous. So I think they were looking for an acqui-hire, but we did not want to join this corporate, so we kind of sold it, and then they insourced it, and then we partied for 2.5 weeks straight in my hometown. Yeah, still most of us being under 20. And then we founded the second business, which became the largest SI for Magento-based implementations in Europe, and was then acquired by a Nasdaq-listed company from the US called CGI.
Yeah. That sounds like amazing. You founded the first product company under 20, then successful services expert consulting company. And the third one is another product, is Spryker. So can you maybe tell us how did this idea with building this product come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me personally, it started really, after the acquisition of my second company, when I was with CGI for a couple of years, where, the company I brought to the table, we have been 170, 180 people roughly when we have been acquired. They put us together with another 100-something people that were kind of left over from Oracle ATG-based 5-year program where CGI built the entire Vodafone commerce global, program and initiative. And then they did some small acquisition in the hybrid space, so another hybrid SI, and then they also added to the portfolio what was back then still Demandware. So we've become, a 300 to 400 people division, and just 2-3 guys managing it, and I was one of them, which was a good thing for me because it was the first time I was working for someone. It was as I always say, I left CGI with a PhD in business management and financial management. In a way, it was good to see how a corporate is being managed and scaled, and more importantly, which again led to Spryker, was have been a couple of observations that I made. First, with Magento, we were mostly active in the retail space. We were mostly building websites and commerce experiences for retail customers. While with a broader portfolio and with a more global portfolio within CGI, we built experiences for publishers, for banks, for insurances, for manufacturers. So for a much broader spectrum of the market than just retail customers. Second, it of course got me insights into not just the Magento platform, but also the what back then was considered to be the enterprise platforms of the market, right? So again, Hybris, Oracle ATG, Demandware. So it helped a lot in seeing where these platforms made sense and where they did fit.
You had pretty broad perspective on the market after working at CGI. Yeah,
it was a pretty broad perspective, technology-wise, vertical-wise, and also more and more it became obvious that from being on the SI side of things, it became obvious that the time of these giant, expensive, slow, monolithic legacy applications coming to an end. We have put thousands of days in customizing very simple things where, I saw the trend of not only going beyond desktop more and more, but also applying the agile methodologies that, in fact, our consulting practice was teaching and preaching very well back then to customers. But from a tool side, this was not supported at all. So I started playing around with the idea of how I would, envision the next generation commerce platform to look like. And this is where I met my co-founders, where I met Alex, who's also a serial entrepreneur, has founded, a number of, very large businesses from consulting to e-commerce in Germany, where I met Fabian, who was our founding CTO, who came over from Rocket Internet, where he was, responsible for building the Zalando experience, the Rocket commerce platform, did the same that with Project A. And we kind of, put all these perspectives together, and, it was very, very congruent in a way that, we saw the market moving, in the same direction, and then we started Spryker back then.
That's awesome. So you put together all the experience you guys had, the great team, and started building the product. I was wondering how you set the goals, because when we started Devante together with Tom 12 years ago, it was after reading the Getting Real book by 37 Signals, classical book on starting new venture, and they are giving this example that with Basecamp they were aiming at MS Project. They were chasing actually they were not chasing MS Project, but actually creating anti-MS projects, so something completely different. Have you guys also had this kind of approach, separating from your biggest competitor in a way, creating something completely different way, contending them or chasing after?
Yeah, look, so, I think the good thing, and it's still, luckily, it's still, true for Spryker, is that we're not spending with our competitors. In fact,
Yeah.
people anticipate us or perceive that we are spending much more time than we actually do, right? We try to, of course, we are aware of, who is doing what. I think this is,
Yes.
the usual homework that you should do, but we really try to focus on, what we believe in and, talking to customers, talking to partners a lot. So when we started, the idea was very simple. We really wanted to build what we call the productized digital best practice. So if you and I and, a bunch of smart people and digital consultants and developers, if we would all be locked in one room, so this is what we said back then, and we would go to a whiteboard asking, if we would build, let's say, a Zalando-like business again, right?
Yes.
How would it look like from a team setup, from a tool setup? What tools would we want to have? How does the platform have to look like? What methodologies would we use? And if we put it all together, and then like a product comes out, so this is what we built, right?
Yeah.
And then we believe very strongly in that. Ultimately, of course, this is the company to be the next global commerce technology leading company, right? Pretty much like there was Intershop in the beginning, in the first cycle. Then there was a Magento. There was like Hybris in the SaaS space. There was Demandware, because like every 5 years or so, 6 years, because of technology waves and cycles, you would have a new category of platform that is defined in the next 5 to 6 years. So this is what we, of course, from a business perspective, believed in and pitched, to investors, saying, look, the time of giant monolithic application is over. Just building a shop system like Magento is over. So now it's about to enable much more than retail customers, so what we call today's vision, to enable transactional business models beyond retail, beyond desktop, beyond pure e-commerce. So be basically the commerce operating system or the backbone of transactional business models worldwide. And so there was a vision, but it didn't start from the competition. It was rather, let's put all the best practices and like productize them in a way.
Yes.
And then hopefully something, of value will come out of it. And in fact, it was in the early days when we did this pitch to customers, it was a hard time, because the first 2 years when, there was not really a demo, the product was very raw, not mature enough yet.
Sure.
It was very, very hard, because the pitch was basically exactly what I just said. It was a lot of market education, a lot of what is it we can learn from the best, how to apply, how to deploy, why is modularity important, why is this decoupledness needed, like, and this is a hard pitch if you do this in a non-functional way, if you don't pitch features but approach.
Absolutely.
Then, at some point you either have luck and then the market turns in your direction and you kind of become the thought leader who always have said things that will become this way, or it doesn't, and then you're out of business, right? So it was very tough 2 years, very tough.
Can imagine. So as you said, this core value proposition, this USP was actually that you are implementing with this product a set of best practices that other agencies, clients, CTOs were actually looking for, right? That's how you see this from the perspective. Like that was the first USP.
Back then, it was very tech focused. So we were talking to the IT departments, we were talking to developers, to CTOs, and many of them have been upset about monolithic applications, for example. So we gave them modularity. Many of them have been upset about not having a decoupled system in terms of front and back end, right? So we gave them a decoupled system. Many of them have been disillusionated about not having the right performance in place. So we gave them a system which comes without cache, which would be lightning fast, which many loved the cleanliness and architecture they knew from the Java world, but haven't seen this being implemented in the PHP world, right? So the Magento was kind of the most complex PHP business application people knew. It was not, you remember it yourself, was not, the best architecture on earth. So, we tried to give them clean code, solid principles, good tooling. So this was the very first, and with that achieved like this agility, the learnings that we collected in the company building startup world. And we believed strongly in, if developers can produce the same outcome in, let's say, twice the time, or half the time, like twice as fast, this would be a huge value proposition,
Yeah, that makes, of course, that makes perfect sense. I first heard of Spryker around 2016, I guess. It was on Magento conference, by the way, and the guys were discussing, this architecture you had. So this, Z backend and Eve's frontend. So actually, it was a headless approach. Before it used to be so popular as today. Why was it so important for you to have this headless? Why headless is so important? I always like to ask this question.
I mean, it was very, very fun because, nowadays a lot of people claim to, who invented this term, etc. So I don't really care about who invented this term. I really claim and I really care about who invented, or who really brought to the market first. And, I remember when we first had it, no one had it. So I think this can be looked up on GitHub easily. But, it's for us, it was really about performance and about, again, decoupling teams and enabling teams to be fast. So we learned with Magento, the front end system was still containing business logic, was still not independently deployable, was still heavy, it was still not fast, required. We always saw like caching, like varnish caching, as a kind of anti-pattern, you could say, because as the word says, caching means, if you think about the French word where it comes from, it means hiding, right? So it means hiding away a slow application performance.
Hiding, right? Hiding the problems from the user.
Exactly. So, and we did not want to hide the problems. We just wanted to make the application fast, right? So we made the application fast in terms of it was modular. You just had the code that you needed. We put all the personalized data into key value storage, and the front itself was very lean, very stupid, not having business logic. It was easy for pure, even junior front-end developers to customize, to deploy. So you could achieve the separation of teams. You could, achieve higher velocity in terms of how they worked. So these were the main principles. It was not that much in the first phase, in the first 1-2 years, about enabling multiple touch points in devices. This came later when we figured out that, of course, now mobile tablets, phablets are a thing. And hey, we already have the APIs. We already have our backend system talking to the front-end system. So it's an easy step for us to enable, experiences at other touch points. But in the first phase, it was about performance, about agility, about less anti-patterns.
That makes perfect sense. And I must say that I love the way you guys are very pragmatic. And what you already said is exactly about this. So this headless approach was just because you needed performance, you needed, this separation of concerns, not another buzzword. And then it was like 2018 or 17 maybe. I read Alex Graf, your co-founder, a blog post called Microservices and Monocycling, saying more or less that microservices are overrated. Of course, you need to have service-oriented architecture, but the microservices are overrated. This is how you see this another trend, microservices?
Yeah, look, so I think this is a very interesting topic, to talk about. So in general, I think we are still having the same view. I think let me start from the beginning. So first of all, I think that everyone agrees nowadays that monolithic applications are not the best practice anymore. Okay, so I think this is like checkbox. So checked. Okay. So now, there are a lot of people out there in the market, especially in the e-commerce market, who try to convince the market that, the only solution not having a monolithic application is going microservices, which is absolutely not true, right? In fact, it's even, wrong. And maybe even you could say a bit dangerous, telling the market, that this is kind of the only approach. Why? Because, and you have consulted, I would say, hundreds of customers worldwide, I would say, right? So did I, and so did many of others who hopefully listen to this podcast. And I would say, for my 17 years now in commerce, I've maybe met 3 to 5 companies in total that can master, a microservice architecture well. And by master, I mean get all the advantages and not the disadvantages. 99.9% of the market can't even operate a monolithic application well enough. Like in terms of deployment, zero downtimes, slicing the team, so getting, the performance in place. And now you give them a much more complex, a very technical kind of things where you distribute it across hundreds of small modules, different versions of APIs.
Yes,
very
absolutely.
often companies would lack the wide in terms of teams, so they would not have the necessary amount of product owners in place, architects. They would not be able to manage contracts well enough. DevOps is a thing. So they kind of, yes, they don't have they end up having no monolith anymore, but much more problems instead, right? And not the upsides.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I see the same. That the DevOps problems with the microservices, for example, is becoming very, very important. Like, I mean, the maintenance cost and the total cost of ownership is getting higher and higher because you have this huge complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we always were thinking, and maybe to add to it, it's also a very technical way of thinking, because business users, and this is important, do not think in modules. They do not think in versions of modules. They don't want to deal with the complexity of managing dependencies and contracts, etc., between them. So what they think, so the category they think in is capabilities, right? So they think about, so when they come to us, they're like, Boris, I need your PIM or I don't need your PIM because I have my own PIM.
Right.
I want to use your CMS. I don't want to use your CMS. I want to use your search. I don't want to use your search. Or, Boris, I have my dedicated pricing service because our pricing logic is complex. I just want your system to consume this pricing via an API. So, we call this capability, and Gartner refers to it, as packaged business capabilities. I think, in this composable enterprise kind of world that we are in, I think, us following the PBC approach is something that is, much closer to our hearts and is really reflected in our architecture, where, you talk about business capabilities. They are completely independent, coming with their own data access layers, APIs, etc. And the user does not have to care about in how many modules underneath the capability itself this is implemented, right? And I think this is the kind of in between. If you have on the low in the left corner, you have the monolith, which is complex to manage, and then on the upper right corner you have the microservice architecture. I think in between is the PBC thing. And this is something we are doing. I think this is the right approach. We are getting very good feedback from users and from customers. So again, don't get me wrong. I think every once in a while, in many use cases, you will have the need to build maybe a dedicated service or two or three or four. So there's nothing bad about encapsulating things into services provided via API, but just do it, in a black and white manner. Just do microservice because you don't want to monolith. I think it's not the right approach. And giving a standard average customer, hundreds of services instead of one big application will most likely not lead to better TCO, will not lead to better operational costs, but rather give them a lot of downsides and no upsides.
Of course, I am even up to the conclusion that the microservices should be decoupled and such granular as your team structure is. So if you have two teams, you can probably maintain two services, and it's good to have it separated because they can work on their own pace. But if you have one single team and 20 microservices, the burden of maintenance is very high.
Yeah, and this is the reality, I think, that we are seeing. So companies are struggling. So I think, nowadays we are all happy that digital maturity on customer side, rises. So, more and more people are being hired. They're building their own teams. They're finding good setups to work with SIs. Yeah. But still, how many customers who would have like 15, 20 teams and all nicely verticalized and synchronized with each other. This is not the reality. If you're a Zalando-like business, right? If you're large enough, then of course, right? But I think the average kind of median customer in the market is definitely not there yet.
Single digit number of cases I saw like this.
Low single digit number. Yeah? And this is exactly the thing why, again, we as Spryker, we follow this packaged business capability based approach. We think it's the right level, to talk to customers. It's the right level of implementation in the architecture, and everything else customers expect just to work. They don't want to talk versions, modules, dependencies. This is something we have to manage, and that we are managing, behind the actual capability for them.
Makes perfect sense. So how you position Spryker over the PaaS, SaaS, on-premise platforms, or maybe the distribution model is, secondary to your business?
No, it's not. I mean, it's a PaaS solution, so I think this is important. It's another, semi-philosophical kind of discussion. I think it's pretty much like this PBC instead of microservices. It's for us PaaS versus SaaS. So we are big believers in allowing much more customization and allowing much more differentiations for customization, than just as you would typically do in a normal SaaS environment where you need to achieve certain economies of scale. And the reason is, the more mature a vertical is. So let's say fashion, for example, it's a very mature digital, when it comes to digital commerce, very mature vertical.
Yes.
And you could also say, maybe in a negative way, from a technology's perspective, vendor, it's very commoditized, right?
And they are not early adopters.
Yes, exactly. So the higher the maturity, the more commoditized this vertical is, the easier it is to have assumption and functionality, and the less customer will naturally want to change in terms of business functionality and the business logic, right? I think this is kind of the trajectory where SaaS becomes, is a good value proposition, because you can give them a Shopify-like or some like experience. Customers can innovate on top of that, build their own user experience-led. This is it. For us, as I said, we try to build a transactional, or to enable transactional business models beyond retail and beyond desktop and beyond e-commerce. And when I think about all these verticals our customers operate in, the multi-trillion-dollar industry combined verticals such as food, such as marketplaces, such as manufacturers, services, sports clubs, like airlines, automotive. So all these verticals that are just on the rise and just start to build not e-commerce responsive websites, but to build transactional business models, services models, subscription models. They are by definition non-commodity. They are by definition more complex, and they are by definition have to build and get deeper into the business logic. I can't go to a food and beverages international player and give them a cart API that just allows to add to cart, remove from cart, change quantity in cart. This doesn't work this way, right? They have much more sophisticated requirements. I think this is where you draw the line. And again, I'm fine with I understand that there is a market for commodity type, to enable commodity type business models, and there are some players who do provide SaaS applications, which is totally fine. Also, some of our competitors are more in that I always call it more mature Shopify kind of space, which is absolutely fine. But for the space we are in and the verticals we do focus on, I think PaaS is the right way to go. So this is why Spryker is PaaS and not SaaS. It's packaged business capabilities, not microservices, and it's API based and headless.
Makes perfect sense. So it's great that you said that, because my next question was about the initial traction, how you get the initial traction, and I guess that's the answer, right? By addressing those specific niche with more complex products or processes where you needed to adapt, right?
If you look at the four typical cases that we are serving today, it's greenfield. It's a lot of greenfield, especially in the corporate world. They are all now finally woke up and really want to build the digital hubs and digital incentives. Billions of dollars are going into finally setting up and building up digital capability. So where they can operate methodology-wise, technology-wise, and team-wise outside of the legacy infrastructure. So I think this is where we are talking to the chief sales officers, chief marketing officer, and where it's a lot about reducing total cost of ownership, rapid time to market, scalability of the business models. Second is attached play, where still the legacy application is there, maybe for some time, because this is, by the way, another advantage of this PBC-based approach, where we can also replace gradually, right? Where we would come in and customers would be like, okay, my problem is not in the order management at first, but in the front end. So I want to have your PIM, I want to have your cart, your checkout, your pricing engine, or the other way around. Hey, my experience works well, but I have in the back end, I have a lot of, my order management is not good, my CRM is not good, my marketplace cockpit is not good. So where we would replace step by step. And then there is, the replacement projects where companies trust us right away that we come in and that we replace one of the incumbents, like, mostly it's, SAP Commerce Cloud. It can be a Salesforce every once in a while. It can be, sometimes a Magento, or sometimes one of the other players. So this is kind of the replacement project. thing, which is very simple because here the value proposition is very, very, very clear in terms of, why is it better? Why is the cost profile more efficient?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And selecting the first market to operate, you started with some specific markets, or you started with this global attitude at the very beginning, or maybe it evolved some way?
Yeah, I mean, there are two perspectives. I think sales and marketing wise, we of course start in our home market, which is Germany. While maybe some of your listeners might be international ones. So just an important side note here, I think like the majority of the commerce technologies in the last 25 years came from Germany.
If not like most of them, like 80% probably. Yeah, hybrids demand were
Intershop, Spryker shopware, commerce tools, etc. So I think for whatever reason, I don't know why, you would maybe more expected to come from the US, but Germany seems to be like the country. So we started, we started in Germany, but from a setup perspective, it was always international. So I mean, like the company internally, we are now 270, 80 people already. 35 nations, so it was always very, very international. The entire code documentation, everything was international. Got a lot of traction also from international community right from the beginning. I think sales marketing wise, we then of course over time opened offices in Amsterdam and the UK, in Switzerland. Now expanding into Latin America and the US. So step by step. Next year will be a lot about the US and
awesome.
APAC as well is an interesting region for us where we are getting tons of requests from partners and from customers.
Sounds like an interesting year ahead of you. So Project A is your investor supporting the company growth. Why Project A? What's the biggest value of having investor as an enterprise product company at all?
So first of all, it's not just Project A. So Project A was the seed investor. They led the seed round. They participated in the A round. We also have another very well-known VC from Berlin called Cherry Ventures. They're very, very famous and doing a lot of exciting stuff. And we added 1P Capital. It's a growth investor from London in our B round in the beginning of 2018, and then have some family offices in as well. So I think it's broad. It's a broad profile. In terms of why, I mean, both like Alex and myself, we have bootstrapped all our companies before, right? So this was not what you would say kind of natural thing for us to do.
It wasn't the default mode.
Was the default mode. However, I think when we started, and I remember, our conversations, it was very obvious to us that, and also from basically having, this is the good thing in our industry, that there have been so many commerce technology vendors before us, and all of them became, or majority of them became very big, like 9-digit, 10-digit exits. So you could trace back very easily, how much capital did they raise, how fast did they grow, their customer. Many of them are public companies, so you have insights into the material. How fast did they grow, their customer base, partner ecosystem, etc. So it's very transparent, which is always easier for you as an entrepreneur versus you step into an industry that is very young and you have to figure out everything by yourself. So for us, it was very obvious that even the first and second generation vendors who have been built, they had even from today's perspective tons of capital available, because building an enterprise software product is very capital intense, right? And it's I always say one of the biggest advantages and main advantages why I would always advise building a company in this mode is because you can shorten time. You can and interestingly enough, now looking backwards, maybe to share some learnings with the listeners here. So you cannot shorten time as much as we hoped we can, right? So we were like, okay, if you don't have to build a business, and by the way, all the other enterprise software commerce companies did it this way, from a professional services organization upwards. So they all had to do the first. So if you look at how Hybrid started, how Intershop started, how all the others started, the first 3, 4, 5 years, they did a lot of professional services work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. And then before they came to the tipping point. And we were like, okay, if we can shorten this, if we kind of reduce the dependency on service work, and if we can focus on the execution on the product side right away, this should help us speed up, right?
Makes sense.
This was the first assumption. This assumption was correct.
So you didn't have to make services for a living. You just could focus on the product.
We could focus on the product. So of course, you always need to have some percentage of services that you do, because you have customers who demand it, you have partners that you need to support with and on board. But it was not for living, as you said, right?
Yeah.
But again, so what outside financing basically gives you is the ability to do multiple tryouts at the same time. And what I mean by that is, typically if you would bootstrap a business, you would be like, okay, this year I go to this trade show, right? And I try it out. If it works, I do it next year again. If not, I do the next one. Or I try this marketing approach this month, and if it works, I double down on it. If not, I drop it, I try the next. And same for products, same basically for everything. And what outside financing gives you is the ability to parallelize those streams. So you can go like, okay, I think all these 4 conferences make sense. So let's try them all this year. Let's not do this in 4 years, but try them all this year. And by the end of this calendar year, we know which 2 we double down on next year and which 2 we drop.
And you just save 75% of the time for checking conferences.
Exactly. And same for people, which is maybe the most important one, right? So because if you're bootstrapping, and this is so to make no illusions here, if you're bootstrapping any business, you would always hire who you can afford, right? Not necessarily who you need. There's a big difference. You might need a certain role, a certain seniority, a certain person right now, but you can't afford. So you would always like hire the sales guy that you can afford, because you can't pay a high OTE maybe, or you would always hire the CTO that you can afford, not maybe the best in class CTO for this business. And this I think is another vector that you need to consider, that having financing in place solves many of these problems. You can hire the people you need faster, right? And at the earlier stage, basically optimizing your equity value better. You can do multiple tryouts of marketing, sales, product approaches at the same time. And this leads to, at every wall at Spryker, we have one slogan, which is time is the most important KPI.
Okay.
Right? Because the space turns itself so fast, technologies come up, technology go, methodologies come up, methodology go. So we operate always in a fixed time window of 5, 7 years, 8 years before the next technology cycle kicks in. And if you want to capitalize in a limited time, if you're building a business which can take 30 years to build, then it's no problem. But if you are having a 10-year window, let's say, then it's kind of fixed. You need to be a bit more paranoid and and iterate faster. And I think this is the ability that outside venture capital gives you. And to be honest, again, to all the listeners who might think about business and starting a business, guys, at the moment, capital is available so much. Markets are flooded with free cash that is searching for ability and potential to be allocated wisely. That it's a founder's market at the moment. It's not an investor's market. So I would highly recommend you to find the right partner. So VC is not equal VC. You asked why Project A, and one of the reasons was that they came in with tons of operational experience. They've been operators themselves.
Okay.
They've built businesses like Rocket Internet, the platform. They've built like Zalando. They've built CityDeal. They've built like hundreds of businesses in our space. So they knew the problems and the value proposition from a technology and business perspective very well. And I think having people by your side who have not always invested in dog food, and now this is the first startup investment into tech, right? I think this is or into a dentist business or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
Or real estate, and this is all true examples. You can easily find a business angel who did his cash with real estate, right? And now he's like, oh, Piotr, you are building a front-end as a service business now. Wow, I give you 500K.
And that's it. What can I offer, right? They don't have network, they don't have this expertise. You said, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it just dump money, and I think at the time where cash is so easily available, good founders, good entrepreneurs will always be funded. I would always recommend, to rather find the right partner and then you don't need to raise 10 million right away. Do this step by step. This helps you. This helps the investor achieve certain milestones, but it definitely gives you the ability to focus on the right thing, not do too much
Makes
services
sense.
work, and hire the right and the best people.
Makes perfect sense. You said something about being paranoidal, and actually that's my second best book, Only Paranoids Survive, by Andy Grove of Intel, describing how they moved from the memory business to CPU business. Great book, by the way. Thanks for this answer. We are getting now to the section of more general questions. I always ask the same questions, and actually each time getting the different answers. So first question is related to the technology cycle you mentioned. 5-7 years, everything's changed. What is the next big thing for the enterprise e-commerce software?
Yeah, I think it's as I said, we see it now moving beyond the commoditized verticals. I think the problems in the commodity retail space have been solved very well. I think if you look at platforms, for example, like Shopify, I think they have the ultimate, value proposition for when it comes to commoditized types of businesses, right? And it's not necessarily about, just small businesses, even, growing businesses, can I think can leverage it very well. When it comes to like every vertical, beyond, the traditional, retailish ones that we know, where it's not about the typical category page, product page, cart checkout kind of user experience. I think they're just about to build and figure out what it is, be it for food and beverages, be it for marketplace type of businesses, be it for subscription type of businesses, for hardware manufacturers, be it for sports club who try to monetize the fan in the 360 kind of way, be it for the airline and airport or transportational companies. So this is why we like this transactional term so much, because it doesn't imply necessarily that it is this e-commerce type of experience. It just implies that you have a certain set of capabilities that you provide that could be the engine for whatever happens behind it. Personally, I'm very excited about the potential within the IoT space. I think, smart devices where you have, as a manufacturer or as a hardware manufacturer, you have the ability to add a completely new business, to your company, which might be a recurring services type of business, where you get rid of all the in between, companies that sit, between you selling the printer and the customer, or you selling the drilling machine and the customer. I think this is very, very exciting. It's something that I see coming a lot. So I think this is where, and what I'm not a big fan of is talking features so much. So again, I get sometimes the impression that everyone is talking about headless, while headless is it's a Mickey Mouse thing, right? So it's not like, it's not the category definition itself. It's one of the solutions, that can help you achieve, these goals. But you're not doing headless for headless sake, right? You're doing this because you solve a business problem.
Of course. That's very important. Okay, thank you for this answer. I really like it. What's the biggest learning of your professional career?
Biggest learning. I think if it's not technology related, then when my second company, when we have been acquired, we got for 6 months someone over from CGI who kind of I think his role, the official role, was integration manager. So his job was basically to integrate every aspect of the business into the CGI business, right? And he was there like temporarily, and he helped, and he was, over time he became a good mentor to me, and maybe even a friend. And I think he was very crucial for not letting the two cultures clash too much. A 40-year-old, 70,000 people company, then with a 180 people company. And he was like, I remember myself being in the early days, first couple of months, I was, very upset about, the massive slowdown that it kind of, I felt. And he managed, let's say, my mood a lot, and try to moderate and explain. And then he gave me one advice, which I think is still something I remember very, very often. He said that choose your battles wisely. And this was, a very, very important one that, ever since helped me a lot and helps me today, because there are so many, challenges, there are so many problems, there are so many issues to fight. There's so many people that, can make you upset, that every once in a while I do remember this guy called Martin, and I'm like, choose your battles wisely, right? So you can't win all the battles. You can't win every argument. You can't win, every complaint or every problem that is thrown at you, right?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, makes perfect sense, especially as for founding new venture or new product, right? You cannot win with everyone. You can win with some guys. Probably the category you choose is the most important.
It's also I'm helping advising some startups and some entrepreneurs, and what I'm always saying them, especially when it comes to product, is that it's much more about what you say no to and not what about you say yes to. And they're like, and they have hard times understanding it at first. And the same for business opportunities. When we have our business meetings, there are so many countries, territories, feature directions, partner approaches we could follow. And I always a big believer in, it's about what you say no to, what features you do not build, what countries you do not enter, what verticals you do not, go after. I think this discipline that helps you a lot, especially when you're a small company, then you have to choose your battles very wisely, and find this one problem you can solve very well, or this one cohort of users. The broader you go, the higher the chance and risk of not making it.
I guess that this is something easier said than done. It's very tough decisions what to not do.
It's like it's like a bit it's like when you have children, right? And we all have been on the other side when gave us advice and we were kind of not listening to it. Now we are mostly on the side of our parents. I think it's just something that you have to go through. Someone tells you not to touch it. You can burn your fingers, but you still want to try it out. I think it's just a natural kind of process.
Makes perfect sense.
My last question is what are your goals for the next year? And what are your goals for the next 3 years?
So I think, next year for us will be a lot about scale. So, we are in this hyper scale mode at the moment. We are growing, triple digit. And I think next year will be, will be the same. So we are, as I said, we're entering the US market very strongly and actively. We're entering other parts of the world, with real teams on the ground, partners on the ground. So this is, on the sales, marketing, executional side. I think, in terms of product, we do have some interesting things coming up in terms of roadmap, some challenges that I feel are not solved well yet, that we will release. Some of them we will announce this week. We'll have our Spryker Excite summit on Thursday 22nd. It will be an online and an on-site mixed event. So I think product wise and technology wise is it. For the next 3 years, I think it's really about, as I said, we want to build and become the next global commerce technology leading company. Really dominate, the current wave and technology cycle. Have the strongest value proposition for sales and marketing customers around the globe when it comes to B2C or B2B or D2C or marketplace type of businesses, and just enable transactional business models everywhere.
Awesome. Sounds great. Fingers crossed for achieving your goals, Boris.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having time for this interview. And guys, if you have any more questions, please put them into the comments, and we will try to answer it, Boris. Thank you, Boris.
Thanks for listening to the CTO-CTO podcast. If you enjoyed this show, if you found it informative, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And of course, stick with us. See you next week.